Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.buzz. Welcome to the Innova.buzz podcast, where we're not just talking about the future, we're living it. We're diving deep into the world of AI and how it's reshaping human connection, one conversation at a time. And today's conversation is with Dawid Naude, who's in Melbourne, Australia, same time zone as me. And I'm really excited to welcome him to the podcast. He's the founder and CEO of Pathfinder, which is an AI accelerator helping businesses make every employee more productive, achieve breakthrough innovation, and create sustainable AI culture. I love that sustainable part as well. Welcome to the Innova.buzz podcast, David. It's a great privilege to have you as my guest.
No worries. Thanks for having me on, Jürgen.
Now, I'm really looking forward to today's conversation because I find it fascinating. You're someone who's implementing AI, but you're also focused on the human side of AI adoption. And as I said, the sustainable part, and part of that sustainable thing is the ethical considerations that come with it. So, can you share more about what drives you in this mission and what impact you aim to make in the world, David?
Yeah, sure. No worries. So I think one of the big things with AI is that sometimes people, they talk about job loss and worry what it means long term for their jobs and all of that. But what I see it so differently, and we see the real effect of this with all the work that we do. The way we see it is your day is already filled with all sorts of low level activity that you could have done, you were able of doing right at the beginning of your career. Maybe you were able to do this even at university, but that's what your day is filled with every day. But you've been a skilled practitioner in your field for years and years and years. And so that's where I see the huge opportunity of AI is first to remove so much of the drudgery that occupies your day to day. I mean, it's really tragic that you spend so much of your day doing things that you could have done 20 years ago. Your skills have developed. The second thing is what I get far more excited about is doing the things that you couldn't do before. And this is where I see this particularly relevant with things like education. Everybody at some point can relate to the moment in a class where your mind drifted for a moment. You were there and then you weren't. And it was almost impossible to hop back on that train and catch up and pay attention for the rest of the class. Now, imagine if you've got English as a second language, or you have a learning difficulty, or you have some a mental challenge like ADHD or something like that. The ability to put AI in the hands of every single student so that every single kid has a 24/7 mentor, teacher, and somebody to just really help them teach whatever they want at their own pace in their own language is it's just so powerful. So that's one of the areas that I get absolutely most excited about. That's all very good, as I do absolutely love all of that. It's not what pays the bills for us. What pays the bills for us and what I get super excited about is when we put AI in the hands of the people that we work with. It's just awesome. They love it. Like they go, oh my gosh, this is incredible. This is going to save me so much time. Like it's such an exciting technology. And yeah, it's just so accessible as well. You don't need a big tech implementation. There's lots of very accessible ways to get started.
Yeah, I think your example of the education one is a really fantastic possibility. I mean, I have had conversations in the past where people have worried that AI will take away the ability of students, particularly young people coming up through school now, take away their ability to think critically. And I kind of don't necessarily see it that way because I think there have been lots of examples in the past. I mean, when we were growing up, we had to rote learn information that was in books. We didn't have the internet in those days, but we did have textbooks, lots of textbooks, and we had libraries that we can get even more textbooks than we could buy or afford to buy, and we could read magazines where people were publishing state-of-the-art information. And I thought, why do you need to rote learn all this stuff and memorize this stuff when you can access it here? And that's how I kind of see AI just on a turbocharge, because there's so much information that is accessible somewhere through AI, and even sort of synthesizing and bringing it together through AI, and removing that need for rote learning. It's sort of like removing the need for the mundane tasks, as you mentioned earlier. But at the same time, we still have to come back to this. how do we educate people to think critically? And I think in business that's really important as well, isn't it? So talk to us a little bit more about how you kind of, when you get that level of excitement in business where people say this is amazing and so on, how do you find that balance between, okay, but just let's think critically about the information you're getting here, let's think critically about how you use this, how do you leverage it for maximum benefit without sort of running off the rails somewhere?
Yeah, I think so. Sometimes I wonder. So if we go back to even the education approach, if we worry about what it might do to critical thinking, I mean, how many kids are actually really good critical thinkers at the first point? I think there's always going to be a portion of people who are cramming, copying, plagiarizing. And so sometimes I wonder what is going to be like, what happens now? Is it because this team, does it just make it easier for them to do
Mm,
that? Because it makes, maybe the reason why they're doing that is because it's difficult to follow the work. Does it actually push them up and now they're understanding instead of copying? I'm not sure. So I think one of the things, another layer to think about here is, do the people who are already critical thinkers, are they now just far better at doing it because you can give it a thought and you can go, can you find all the holes in this? And it'll come back to you and you'll go, oh my gosh, all sorts of things that are so obvious now when I look
mm,
at it, but I just didn't think about it at the time. Same as when you're having a conversation with someone. Does it bring up the capability of everybody who's kind of in the middle? I'm not actually sure the long term impact of this, and also what is the trade off. So yes, maybe you sacrifice some critical thinking, but if you're also trading that off where everything else in your life is a heck of a lot easier,
mm,
when you're having to do a one-off task like edit something in a tool that you only need to do once, maybe you're creating the only video that you've ever created and you don't want to spend a couple of hours trying to figure this out and a tool just tells you how to do it. So I think there's some broader things around what it enables versus what it sacrifices. There is definitely a critical thinking impact. So it's very easy to be lazy and just ask it a question and get an answer. So we're all domain experts in the field that we're practicing in. So I'm able to leverage it really effectively because I know the questions to
mm.
ask, and also it's not input output for me. It's a
Yeah.
conversation. People talk about how to prompt it and all of that, and there is a whole lot of truth in that, but it's certainly not how I use it. I would say I'm the worst prompter there is because I have long conversations. So I'll ask a question with enough information that it gives me a first response, and then I'll ask it to change it and tweak it and question it and move it. But I know what I'm looking for because I already know the field.
Mm.
So what I wonder is, what does it mean at the beginning of your career where you don't know the field, you lean to ChatGPT to give you the answer, as opposed to help you learn this field and help you create that answer yourself. So I'll be honest, I don't think we know the long-term impact of a lot of these things, but we do know that it is an absolute weapon for thinking and learning because you can test concepts with it, you can understand things incredibly deeply. And for instance, I often walk on the beach just with my AirPods in. There's so many big advancements with AI, technical advancements and breakthrough, and like breakthrough technical capabilities. So I'll put my AirPods in, put it on advanced voice mode, walk on the beach with my dog, and just have a long conversation trying to understand a new topic. So that's how it helps
Mm.
my critical thinking. I'm not going to read a 200-page technical paper, but I'm having a conversation with it, understanding the key concepts of it. And I'll say, so am I on the right path here? Sounds like it does this, but doesn't do this. Is that on the right track? And it will say, look, you're on the right track in these areas, but think of this area more like that. And it's more like I think that just has enhanced my critical thinking so much there, and also made me access something that would have been inaccessible to me before. I just don't have the time with building this business to go through every technical innovation.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point is giving you time to delve into those things. And I know in the very early days of ChatGPT, I I was kind of asking just very basic questions. I didn't sort of know about prompt engineering. It only came up sort of in as a concept after I'd been playing with ChatGPT for quite some time, and people started figuring out that you had to develop these really good prompts, and prompt engineering became a thing. But before that, I'd ask a question, and then I'd get the response, and then I'd go back and say, either I don't like that response, can you reframe that in a different light, if I was getting it to generate content, or if I was asking a question for factual information, I'd get something and I'd say, "Are you sure that's right?" Or I'd say, "Can you tell me more about that?" Or can you tell me more about this particular aspect? And I'd very quickly get into that. So I've got some of my very early ones I've actually saved. I put together a whole strategy for the community we're building with ChatGPT, but it was like a 2-hour conversation, and I thought, this is absolutely amazing, because it's like being in a room with a couple of business coaches and having that conversation for 2 hours. And I know one of the things I said, well, every answer I give you, ask me some more questions as a follow up, or if I come back and challenge something you've given me, come back and ask me why I'm challenging that, or why I don't like that, or whatever it is. And in the end, that gave me some amazing output. And then over time, of course, with this prompt engineering stuff, I started delving into that. Now I've got some really good prompts, but even with those prompts, I'm still doing the conversation part. And I still say to people, it's not ask a question, get an answer. That's not the value of it. The value of it is in having a conversation.
Yeah, and I think even like as a first principle, there's understanding the intent of the interface that you're working with. So if we think of ChatGPT as an example, it's meant to be, I mean, OpenAI's fundamental goal, they'd have a lot of, I mean, it's a tricky area. They're kind of for profit, but not, and kind of working through that. But if you think of fundamentally, they want ChatGPT adopted, right? And it behaves like a person. We tend to like people who validate what we say. People say, oh, they like to be challenged. It's kind of not true. We hang out with people who smile and nod and reinforce what we've already said, makes us feel good about ourselves. So if you think of something like ChatGPT, if it's behaving like a person, it's been grounded to reinforce what you're already saying. So going into that upfront, and I'm just saying this as a user experience component. So that means that you need to treat it like, I want you to tell me everything wrong with this. I don't want you to, like, you actually have to pull it out of it. So it doesn't need to be, there's these very complicated prompt frameworks, and those prompt frameworks are probably far more appropriate for an engineer who's integrating two systems that doesn't get to go back and forth. It kind of has to get it right the first time when it's summarizing the transcript of a phone call in a call center. So that prompt makes a whole lot of sense to do that properly. But if you think of if you're riffing back and forth with a tool like ChatGPT, just simple prompt awareness of things like actually ask it to find holes if you're asking it to see what it thinks of something. So ask it the amount as well. That really helps. So if you say, can you find, instead of saying, could you find all the things wrong with this, can you find 10 things wrong with this? That seems to help. Can you tell me all the reasons for and against the reason why I should buy this new camera? Whereas if I were to just say, I'm considering buying this camera, am I making a good decision?
It'll usually say, great choice.
I mean,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, and it may not be exactly that, but it's certainly pretty much in that direction. Like, it's going to say, well, if you want to take up photography, it's a great hobby and all of that, without challenging you. In the past, you've told me you've got 3 kids and you've got a very busy life, and now you're going to go spend $5,000 on a fancy camera. And also my history, all my training knowledge as ChatGPT tells me that most people who spend $5,000 on a DSLR or mirrorless or whatever, they use it a handful of times and then it just sits there and gathers dust. So like, that's the friend you want, actually, but it's not usually the friend we like. That's why it's grounded that way.
Yeah, I think that's one of the, so I guess it's sort of an ethical question, is the bias that it brings with it. And I did an interesting experiment recently with it, and it was just sort of, I don't know, it sort of just came to me. I'd had this conversation with a friend of mine, and we have quite vastly different political views. And we were talking about a political topic, and very quickly, of course, it gets a little bit heated, and then arguments in both directions become a little bit irrational, and even if they're rational, neither side's listening to the other. And somehow I was reflecting back on that sitting in front of the computer, and I sort of thought, I wonder how ChatGPT would deal with this. And I thought, I'll do an experiment here. So I gave it a prompt that went something like, I want you to represent this position. So that was my friend's position on this topic, knowing everything you know right now. And I want you to debate with me. So I'm going to debate the opposite. I'm going to debate this position, which was the opposite. And I want you to debate this with me. I want you to be respectful. I want you to be factual. I want you to not be convinced by any argument I bring. Stick to your guns no matter what. And it was interesting because it kept coming back and reinforcing the points I was making. It said, oh, you raise a really valid point, and yes, that's a concern. And then it would go back to its argument. And it was a fascinating experiment from the point of view of I could see it still validating me. It was almost being over respectful, and yet it was following the instructions. It was sticking to its argument that I'd given it. And then at some point, it started going around in circles. So it would sort of start regurgitating information. And I thought, well, there's nothing new happening now. And then I said to it, now I want you to switch sides. And I want you to tell me what I could have done better to convince you about my arguments. And it turned around and it consolidated all the stuff I'd said, and it really put it together in a much more comprehensive snapshot, because of course it removed all the emotion, but it added a couple of key points that I hadn't really brought into the argument. I hadn't necessarily thought of them in that way before, and I thought, oh, wow, that's really interesting. That's a useful bit of information. And then at the end, I said, well, I can't argue with you the opposite side, because I can't take the opposite view because I don't believe in it. And it said, oh, I totally understand that, and that was sort of the end of it. But I thought that's an interesting application, because it sort of helps you clarify your thinking around something that can be very, very emotional if you get sort of wrapped up in it.
I think it has to be biased, because it has to give an answer that isn't it depends. Like, imagine if every time you asked the question it said it depends. So like it has to have a view. The only thing that it's able to do that isn't biased is if it's scientific, like if it's proper science. It can be valid, objectively refuted or validated, boiling point of water, things like that. Everything else, it really depends. I'm thinking of selling my business. What price do you think I should get? Like, it's going to have a view on that. But the answer is, like, it really depends. And, what's the best strategy for doing this? And that's where first having awareness of how these things are created is important. So a lot of them are trained on the same data now. There's all publicly available web scrapes and all of that. Some have a whole lot of incredibly valuable proprietary data. Think of something like Google with all the Google data that they have. But there's a layer between that training data and what you see that's called system prompts. And this is really important to understand how this works. So you've got this fundamental training data, and then how it responds, essentially how the personality it's been given and its guide rails and rules, is this very long blob of text called system prompts. Now, somebody like OpenAI, they don't publish the system prompts for ChatGPT. It's secret source, right? Like, it's Grange wine here in Australia. It's its own blend, right? You don't know what goes into that blend each year. But somebody like Anthropic with Claude, and I encourage everybody to do this. It's a fantastic activity. Go onto Claude's website and look up system prompts, and you can actually see how Claude has instructed their AI to interact with you. So Claude is not entirely open. It's not like you get to see what the training data was and all of that, but at least you can see the system prompts. And to give you an example, if I were to ask Claude to do something really bad, so can you help me create some kind of poisonous gas or something like that? One of their system prompts is written in a way where it's going to give you the benefit of the doubt that it kind of misheard you or that you've written it incorrectly, something like that. So first it's going to say, it sounds like you're trying to do this, or try clarify it or something like that. It's not either immediately going to help you or tell you not to do that. It's going to give you a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. And because, maybe it is going to get these things wrong occasionally. So you don't want to have this experience where it's a hard yes or hard no, and you're constantly having to tell it, no, I wasn't actually asking you to do that. But I find it a personally fascinating exercise to go through all these system prompts of how they ensure that it has rules, but also that it's an enjoyable experience when you work when you play with a tool like Claude, because a lot's gone into the way it responds, the length of the responses, and all of that. I mean, many of us, ChatGPT is a lot better at it now, but particularly up until a couple months ago, you'd ask it a question, and it would reply in almost essay form. It'd be a page at least. You're asking for some ideas for something, and it's all sorts of paragraphs and headings and all of that. When just a couple would have done, just a couple of bullet points. So those types of user experiences are really important. So the bias is a really interesting one to be aware of. I think a more holistic question as well is, if you rely on this so much, and this is the critical thinking question, then now we're essentially delegating our thinking to like a 20-kilometer radius in California. That's where most of these companies exist. It's not even in the States. It's not even California. It's literally it's a very, very small area where all the universities are, all the big companies like OpenAI, etc. So it's a tricky one. There's no malice involved or anything like that, but we're used to searching for an answer, not just being given an answer. If you think of Google, you ask a question, you get given sources to find the answer. You're not just given the answer, whereas a tool like ChatGPT does. So what that means long term, I don't know. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, I mean, one of the prompts I often give it if I'm searching for information is cite your sources. Give me the references that you base this on, and that gives me then the ability. It's kind of like an advanced Google search in that it's given me a bit of a summary answer to my question, but then I've got the references it's based that on, and I can go and read those and dig deeper. But yeah, I think that the concept of bias in it is something that I think about from time to time. And I certainly think when I'm doing something, I mean, I was doing something this morning where I was looking at a couple of software systems and wanted to know, in fact, it was an AI software system. I wanted to know, does this one have as good privacy as the other one? And in the old days, I would have gone on Google, I would have looked up their websites, I would have trawled through their privacy statements, I would have probably set up, in fact, I would have, if I was pre-purchasing, set up a spreadsheet with comparison of all the key points that I was interested in. And what I did there was I went on to ChatGPT. I think I used ChatGPT, or I used one of them, and I said, can you compare these two things for privacy aspects? And also I added one other that I wanted, and then it sort of gave me the rundown of it. And then I said, okay, can you give me a table of those can you give me that in tabular form? So it took me about 2 minutes, and I had something that was probably a couple of hours research before that. But then I sort of think back, well, is that taking away my ability to research these things? Because that'd be the sort of thing I do with the camera example you did earlier. I'd be going through that. I probably spent half of the purchase experience was all the research and going through all the information that I had and then making the decision.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's an interesting question because it sounds like you would have done the research anyways, whether you had ChatGPT or not. You were still going to do that activity. There's a whole lot of people that have massive, they've got great intentions and energy and they want to do things, but they just can't. They just don't get the time. So one great example of this is I presented at the Australian Shareholders Association Investor Conference recently, and every person in the audience there really wants to read the annual report from the first character to the end of every single one of their investments. They really want to do that. And every year they say, this year, I'm going to read these things a lot more thoroughly. And they never do because they're busy. And also, except for very few people, it's one of the most boring
Yeah,
activities you could
yeah.
ever imagine. But there are going to be people who love that. The ability to now say, and I showed them, I mean, this is such simple AI
Mm,
usage, right? Just putting an annual report into ChatGPT and say, can you tell me about what their growth has been like over the last 5 years? And the accuracy here is really high because I've grounded it in the
mm,
information. Then let's say it's Coles, you're doing this for Coles, and you can now add the Woolworths annual report and say, like, how different are these? Like, I'm just trying to find out which one has more stores, revenue, things like that. This is something that so many people would have been wanting to do, but they got busy full
mm,
lives, families, work, all of that. But the ability now to make use of half an hour and just get so much done in that time, versus never doing anything at all because it's such a big leap. I think that's one of the key trade-offs there. And also, I mean, some people are going to enjoy. We're, for a lot of things in life, we're happy to trade effort. We're happy to. It's a labor of love. Like, we put in the effort because we enjoy the process. Particularly in Australia, we do this every single day with coffee. Like, you could go to Seven
mm,
Eleven and punch that thing and pay $1 and you're going to get a 7-Eleven coffee. Even I think a lot of people probably not be able to tell the difference, but we'll still go stand in the queue, wait for the barista. Sometimes the coffee's good, other times it's not. Like, there's some things where the effort is actually part of the process and enjoyable. And that coffee example I really like because people talk about jobs and what does this mean? And I think that there's so much that we still want to have human interaction with
mm,
everywhere. I think we all were surprised how quickly after COVID we had the desire to go back to in person. Maybe not at the same amount because there's convenience in having that flexibility. And things like conference venues. Could you imagine all the major conference venues globally wondering what happens? What do we demolish the space in the future and replace it with office buildings? Like, what is, well, not office building, parks, because people aren't going to go to
mm,
conferences anymore. And it rebounded significantly within a year and now almost entirely. And that coffee example there is, if you had a button in a wall that you pushed it and the world's best, most independently verified, everybody agrees you've never tasted better coffee than this, and it costs $1. And next to that, you've got this barista where now in Australia it's $5.50. You have to queue up. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes they're not even that friendly, but most of the time they obviously wouldn't go there. Most people are still going to
yeah,
go
yeah.
get the coffee from the person, pay 5 times as much for worse coffee that takes
Mm,
longer. So it's human. So I think that's where I still see it as a great enabler. And I think it's actually going to help us be, because we're going to get rid of so much of the stuff that is so drudgerous in our day to day. Like, I still think if the more authentic, the more human you are, the more you're going to be able to leverage this technology.
mm. Yeah, that's it's a good example. That coffee example, I think it resonates with most people, particularly in Melbourne. Melbourne's a well-known coffee city, coffee culture. Um, some of the I know some of the work you do um, involves implementing AIs. Can you give us some kind of examples where it's really enhanced the business in a way that has genuinely brought together humans in that connection that you talked about?
Yeah, definitely. So it's in. So I've got so many different examples, but I think the probably the biggest meta theme to this is how much has changed over the last 18 months since we launched the business. When I launched the business, I really thought, whilst I loved ChatGPT and used it, loved it, thought it was mind blowing and amazing, I thought that this is a fantastic demo of the technology underneath it, the large language model. I thought that if you're a business to get real value out of AI, it's going to require implementation, integration with your data, all of these things, big projects, complex spend. Over the last year, the underlying tool has become so much better. Something like ChatGPT, just by itself, with no proprietary information, no integration, or anything like that, has become so much better and such a useful tool that there are implementations that we did last year that were very expensive that you could now just do using prompting in ChatGPT, and also all of the additional tools that it's added. Okay, so a few examples. So one was we created a tool that allowed one law firm to be able to create instructions to assess contracts. So they would spend a lot of time doing things like non-disclosure agreements and that, where it got sent to them, they had to review, is it okay? Sign off, yep, no worries. Huge waste of time. And most 95% of them are okay. You're a senior lawyer, you're spending your time doing this. So we created a simple tool that allowed them to put something like that in, a non-disclosure agreement, and it would critique all the areas, like assess it against all their rules. Nice table, all of that. You can get the same outcome now just by creating a GPT in ChatGPT. And the thing with that thing that we built there is they have to maintain it. So when there's a new model, they have to go use some code to change it. There's bugs, they're paying for the uptime, all of that. Another example is we did one project where we certified training content for one particular industry, where in order for your training content to be eligible for CPD points for that industry, this body has to certify it. And again, like an expensive, complicated project, it could do video, it could do text, it could do audio, and say, yep, it meets the minimum requirements, it's eligible for training content. You can do the same thing now. You can get probably 90% of the way there, not on the video, but there's a way you could string it together. You could take the video and use one tool to get all the transcript out and then put it into ChatGPT, and you get like 95% of the way there just using an off-the-shelf tool. So that's where it's been really mind-blowing to me how much more capable these tools have become, particularly now with the reasoning models, the ones that think. So, some of the other things that we do now, these tools don't do this yet, but they will soon. We build a lot of prediction models, predicting Australia's demand for particular goods for manufacturers, be it fruit and vegetables or meat and poultry, that as well. Predicting outages and things like that. But really what our focus has moved to now is that before you dive into complexity, you should learn how to give everybody in your team, everybody in your company, an everyday AI assistant. It's a nice way of saying ChatGPT, because we're not trying to say you have to choose the right tool for your company, but that's what we're saying. Every person in your company is going to have like thousands of activities that don't neatly fit into a well-structured process. And that's what occupies most of our day. That's where it's email, spreadsheets, copy paste, back and forth, all of that. Everybody needs to know how to leverage that really, really well. As soon as you start finding the edges of that, where people say, I love how it works, but it's really frustrating to copy paste and export and all that from this tool, at that point, you should start looking at moving beyond that and implementing something more sophisticated. But it's been mind-blowing the results that people can get from this. So one example is there was one real estate company that we worked with. It was a relatively small real estate company. They asked us to just do some training. And because it was a small company, we thought we'll just train them up on how to use a couple of off-the-shelf tools. A couple of weeks later, we checked in with them, and they'd done more in those few weeks than we'd seen any corporate do in the 6 months that we've been working with them. They'd created a GPT that updates all of that, or creates real estate listings for them in their format. Fantastic. They'd created a GPT that allows them to take a bond exit condition report, put it in there, and it'll create the whole email to the tenant telling them what they should clean up and all of that. They took a lot of pride in that, of how they structured that. They'd refreshed all of their tenant handbooks in several languages as well, and used an off-the-shelf tool called Gamma to turn it into these beautiful, rich handbooks that have beautiful iconography and images and all of that. And they'd created an AI video avatar of the CEO who would give market updates in Mandarin and Vietnamese and several other languages on what's happening in the property market in that state. And I was just blown away. So I think that made me really rethink what's possible with these off-the-shelf tools instead of the complex integration work. We still do a lot of that, but I think that the power is actually giving everybody the ability to use this tool within their own role, whilst the organization does all the complex and integration things. That's where I see the real power. But most have no idea how to use these tools. They really don't.
Yeah, it's amazing how many new tools are being developed there that kind of are based on these large language models and do things like creating video avatars and that. And I'm seeing stuff all the time, and I can't even keep up with testing them out. I should use ChatGPT to say, "Hey, can you give me a summary of all these things? What do they do?" and compare them.
Yeah, I'd be very good
Yeah.
at that. And even in that example, you have the underlying tool, but then you have the features of the tool as well. And even the people who consider themselves power users, I'm yet to meet a single one, unless they're actually an AI
Mm,
trainer or something like that. It's their profession where they've done what we see as the bare minimum of using these tools, which is you've configured your custom instructions, you've created a GPT or two, and you know when to use reasoning models versus using base models. And they're not to blame for this. It's not a particularly good user interface. It's not a good expectation of an end user to know when I do one task I use 4.0 and when I use another task I use
mm,
0.3. It doesn't make any sense. And 0.3 is better than 4.0 at most things, but takes longer. But people one is it's the position, the numbers one up, and then the position of the O's moved from one side of the digit to the other. So the user experience I think is absolutely terrible. But in your example as well, even a tool like ChatGPT has a task feature that nobody uses, but is right there, where you could say every Friday morning, I want you to scan the internet and look for any new, popular, well vetted AI tools that can help make podcasting easier for me. Now, it's going to do it for you automatically. It's going to runs that prompt for you automatically on a Friday morning. It's going to send you an email saying it's done. Click this button, and it's going to take you into ChatGPT where it's run. So I still think that the best gateway drug is something like ChatGPT. Become an expert. It's not hard to become an expert at ChatGPT. It's not hard. You just need to be shown what's possible and then start using it, because most people aren't aware of all the things that it can
mm.
do.
Great. All right. It's fascinating conversation. There's obviously lots of avenues we could go off on side tangents there, and maybe we need to have another conversation. But I'm just aware of the time now. I think it's a good time to move on to our buzz round, where it's down to 3 questions now. I've got same 3 questions I ask of every guest. The idea is you'll share some tips from your experience and inspire the listener to go and do something awesome as a result. So, first question is, what's the most innovative way you've seen AI used to strengthen human relationships in a way that really impressed you?
Okay. Most innovative way to strengthen use relationships. So I wouldn't say I've seen this used that much, but when I have seen it, there's actually only one person who I saw use it this way. Is They described the person they were meeting with, and it hadn't been. This was somebody. It was a client that the interactions hadn't been great, and they were wondering what was going on, and they were trying to fix this without understanding the core problem. So they described the situation to ChatGPT, the company, the role, all of that, and they said, "Look, can you help me understand their perspective?" And all of a sudden, because they put the title of the role, they realized that they were one small blip in just an enormous amount of responsibilities that this person has to manage, and they were treating it as if they're this person's
Mm,
whole world. So that's one way on the work side. On the home side, my wife uses it to help create stories to help our kids deal with potentially difficult
mm,
situations. So if a kid had treated one of our kids really, really badly at school or something like that and was really unhappy about something, um, Kim will use it to literally create like a fairy
right.
tale where it describes the lesson that can be learned and all of that. It's actually incredible, and the amazing thing about this, it really works. It
Mm.
does work. So that was
Yeah, that's
fascinating.
fascinating. I remember when I very first time I discovered ChatGPT, the very first thing I did was I said, "Write me a story about something," and I just we still had our cat at the time, and um, he was suffering and needed to be bathed, and bathing the cat. If for any cat owners that know how much cats love water. They will probably have good imagination of what that experience was like. And so I went into ChatGPT and I said, no, I had to bathe my cat. Can you write me a humorous story about this? And I think I might have asked for a poem or something. And that kind of blew me away and won me over straight away, because it gave me this really interesting poem. But I hadn't sort of extrapolated it to that level, which is a really practical application. That was just something silly.
Yeah, it's amazing, and that also is a good highlight of how strange this technology is. With AI, it's a new field. It's called emergent technology, or a new name, where emergent capabilities just emerge. Nobody, when these things were initially trained, they didn't know that it was going to be able to write poetry or create songs or things like that. They just realized by accident that it could do these things. It just shows you how strange this technology is, that we find out by accident that it can do something like writing poetry.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right. Based on your own experience, what's the best thing you've done to integrate AI in a way that enhances human connection?
So I think it's a bit of a meta one for me, because I'm an AI guy. It's our company. It's everything that we do. The way that I integrate it is, honestly, I just show people how to use it, and to do things that save them a ton of time and do things that they couldn't do before. And I show, because I have a lot of dad friends, a lot of mom friends, family friends, things like that. I show them how they can have fun with their family using these tools. And so my wife kind of hates it, because it usually takes like 2 minutes for any like kid's birthday party, like one on the weekend, turn into me showing people how to use ChatGPT and configure it on their phones. And I'll show like how to make all sorts of funny scenes. And we've got a very secure version, so I've got no issues with putting like a photo of my kids in there and say turning them into Minecraft characters and things like that. So just having a lot of fun with it is something really interesting, and making people's eyes aware of it. So I think that's probably the angle I come at it from.
And I think that's a good way for people to kind of get exposed to it first and learn it. In some ways, that was the genesis of the computer gaming industries, right? It was the way people first experienced computers, and then suddenly it kind of became part of everyday life that you work with computers.
Yeah, exactly. And you'd think you probably Googled what's a great dinner recipe before you Googled how do I fix this VLOOKUP in my
Yeah.
Excel, right? Like it probably started at home.
Yeah. All right. And final question of the buzz round. What's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves through leveraging AI in a way that really gives that genuine human connection?
Yeah, so I would so if it's all about human connection and AI, it understanding people more deeply, or okay, so no, this is how I would approach it. So you show up very superficially. So let me do a business context. If you're seeing a new customer, it's an industry that you kind of know, but not that well. You're probably showing up there quite superficially. You've shown up, might have Googled them, might have had a quick look at their website. Let's say it's a pharmacy. Compare that to actually showing up and you've had a long conversation. It can be in the car on the way to seeing the pharmacy. You could say, tell me everything about the pharmacy industry at the moment. What challenges are pharmacy owners facing at the moment? What are the top 3 things that would help ease the burden that they're facing at the moment? And you're just having a conversation in the car. So I think understanding somebody really well, and now you're spending your conversation with them, not your brain kind of quickly trying to understand the customer and the industry. It's a much deeper conversation, because you've got a really starting point, and now you're talking about solutions and where you can help. So it comes back to how this conversation started in some ways, with education, using it to learn and understand. I think that's absolutely the biggest thing I would use it for.
Excellent. Yeah. And again, highlighting the conversations are where the value of these things are, rather than just a one-off prompt and
Yeah.
get an answer. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, thanks for getting us through the buzz round, David, and thanks for the conversation so far. It's been really great. Now, where can people find out more about you, about the work you do at Pathfinder, and maybe even reach out and say thanks for what you've shared?
Yeah, definitely. It's probably on my LinkedIn would be the best. But given this is a podcast and all of that, we've actually made it really easy for people to get started with AI. We have a website that's called startlearning.ai. That's going to redirect you to our monthly public masterclass. So if you really want to get started with this, you're not sure what's next, you're not sure what's possible, just go to startlearning.ai, and that's going to give you access. And please invite your whole team. It's a free public thing where we're just going to show you our top ways to get started. You're going to become a real pro at ChatGPT during that session. And I'll be on it as well, and my details are there too. But I'd say dive in over there.
Excellent. Well, we'll have that link in the show notes, of course. People can click straight through. So thanks for that. That sounds really valuable. And thanks. Well, actually, one more question. What action would you like our listener to take other than the one you've just given us? What action would you like our listener to take out of the conversation today?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's so funny. Like the best way, okay, so definitely get ChatGPT. Like grab it, grab the free one. I say ChatGPT not as an endorsement for the product, but it is the most well-rounded and broadest. Others might be strong in one area or another. So, but I think it's a great starting point. First thing you should do to it is say, "Can you interview me?" And then afterwards, I want you to recommend me the top 10 ways of how I should use ChatGPT. So have ChatGPT tell you how to use
Hmm.
ChatGPT and then give it a crack.
That's an interesting one. I'll have to go and do that as soon as we're done here. Excellent. Great call to action. All right. Well, and I might share that somewhere once I do that. So thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights with us so generously today, David. This has been fabulous, fabulous conversation. I've learned a lot and actually have an action to take away directly after the episode. And all the best for the future. And please do stay in touch.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. It's been great.